Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron speaking, spreading the word, number 8. I get up early in the morning to record these programs at my house. I do most of the producing, recording at home with advice from people from the local charter TV station. When I get up early, I go down for a coffee when the coffee house opens. Then I go back a few times during the day while I'm working at the local college library, where I do a lot of my computer work because they have excellent facilities and any resident of the state can use these libraries at minimal cost for copies and things like that. I will be ringing this bell from time to time tonight because when I go around noon to the coffee shop, I meet two normal people named Bill. By the way, they both drive motorcycles when it's not raining and come in other vehicles when it is raining, but they're there most days. And they sit with a bunch of conservative people, mostly men, but a few ladies, where I tend to go as well, not with the liberal people at the other table. We never sit over there. They don't like us. And tonight I'll be ringing a bell because when the two Bills watch my program, they say, "Brian, you don't speak loud enough. You're very boring." And we fall asleep. We tend to fall asleep. One of the Bills goes to bed very early. The other stays up till about 11. They're normal people and live a normal life. I'm a bit abnormal because of the way I've lived my life. I was thinking of naming one of my books, The Life of an Abnormal Person, but I decided to name it A Life in the Fast Lane instead. So I'll be ringing this bell from time to time tonight to keep the two Bills awake, and I'd like to ask their wives to help me by either punching them in the nose once in a while or shaking them, give them a good shake-up. And if Bill number 1 says he has to go to bed early, 6 or 7 o'clock, and can't watch the program, and pour some water on his head, cold water. That'll keep him awake for a while. Bill number 2, who owns quite a bit of land in Winsted, records the program so that he can watch it at his leisure time. So you will be hearing this bell from time to time tonight because I'm trying to keep the two Bills and anybody else who falls asleep during my programs awake. Wake up, Bills. Tonight's program will be about a few different topics. The first thing I'd like to say is that we are still collecting signatures on the petition. The petition will be submitted on or before the September 20th public hearing at the Pearson Band Room at 7 p.m. Some of the names already collected are being submitted with a formal application to the town for putting the wording or very close to the wording of Section 10.6 back into the brand new planning and zoning regulations. And We will have to wait about 30 days for it to go through the town process, and then we may have, will most likely have, another public hearing after the September 20th public hearing that we are preparing for. And we need many, many, many of the petition signers to come to that meeting. They will be, of course, most are all non-conforming property owners in the town, Highland Lake, and perhaps even some in Winchester. We need people to speak up. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that it takes to change the minds of leaders that are dead reckoned to get their way when they come up with new planning and zoning regulations, or any other regulations in Winston anyway. They have a hidden agenda. They're dead reckoned. They know what they want. They'll try to force it down your throat if they can. And it takes people to act as checks and balances to make sure that the residents, citizens, property owners, especially the non-conforming property owners, rights are protected throughout this process. Now, how do you do that? We'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. And the next issue we're going to discuss tonight is the last planning and zoning meeting on August 22nd. I took an excerpt from that where they talked about the planning and zoning regulations. And that's kind of interesting, so I'll probably play that, and I may even comment on it. I don't know, it depends on how much time there is towards the end of the program. Now, part of the reason that I'm involved here is because I don't work. I'm retired. I have plenty of time to help the residents in the town of Winchester and the city of Winston. I have time to help them. I also believe in property owners' rights. I don't like to see them taken away unless proper consideration has been given to the new rights, and that everybody is aware of what's going to happen and has a chance to influence it. Now, the process is very simple. I will explain it to you, and maybe you can do it too in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city. It isn't easy. It's very, very difficult. The first thing is people will label you as a problem. You have to be able to live with that. I've lived with it all my life, so it's easy for me. Nobody wants to see me coming around the world, a young American trying to help them fix their multi-million-dollar computer system. They didn't want to see that. But they didn't have anybody in their own country that could do it. So the Americans would send people like me around the world to help them. Nobody liked to see us coming. Just like nobody likes to see us coming when we go out with a petition around our town and city and try to explain things to people. Some residents, non-conforming property owners, say, "We have company right now. Can you come back later after they're gone?" With very little consideration for the person walking around trying to explain the petition to them. First of all, it takes, as I said in other programs, it takes quite a bit of time to explain it. So let's say it's 10 or 15 minutes to say, here's what the petition's all about. And then they ask questions. That's probably another 10 minutes, maybe 15. And then they tell you what all their problems have been over the years, trying to get applications, permits, etc., through the town hall. They don't always understand that it's not really the town hall employees' problem here. It's a problem that we get from the committees and commissions and appointed people, elected people, who perhaps aren't qualified to do their jobs, especially in the financial area and in the environmental area and other areas like that. So you have to listen to everybody say what problems they've had in the past. They couldn't get this, they couldn't get that, the neighbor got this, the neighbor got that, but they couldn't get this and they couldn't get that, and they still can't get this and they still can't get that, but the neighbors can get it. Why is that? There seems to be, written into these regulations, a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, maybes, maybe not, that kind of thing. So, once again, what I do is once I understand what somebody's problem is, I take it to somebody who understands the planning and zoning regulations. It could be Steve Sedlowski, it could be Mark Melanson, it could be Michael Ham, who used to be vice chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission and was on that commission for many years and is also a builder, so he knows quite a bit about the regulations. And I ask them. And then they give me a pretty good, straightforward, honest answer. They're not the problem. The problem is the commission itself, usually, and the consultants they hire to give them help. Now, people don't usually hire consultants unless they know the consultant is going to tell them what they want to hear. That happens throughout business all over the world. We're going to hire a consultant. We want to hire a consultant that will tell us what we want to hear so we can then get it across to the stockholders or the citizens or anything like that. So that's a given. Now, I'm not saying that these consultants aren't intelligent. I'm not saying that they don't know a lot about the subject. But in the end, it's the commission that has the power to make the decisions. And they may accept your input at the public hearing, and they may not. Now, there are certain laws that they must abide by. And often, it does get into the case where somebody sues the town for one reason or another, or the city for one reason or another, and that could happen here too. But in order to do that, it costs a lot of money. Now, we used to have a group in town that protected people like us, and that was the Taxpayers Association. The Taxpayers Association has now dwindled down to very few people. They still have a lot of supporters, I would say 100 or 200 supporters around the town and city, but they don't have the muscle and power that they had when I retired here in the year 2002. People are getting older. There's a new generation of people coming in. They have a different way of looking at things. A lot of them don't make too much money anyway. They get money from the state and federal government, things like that. So it's a whole different approach to attacking these problems and trying to resolve them. So what I do is I ask people, I get them to explain to me what their future needs might be, what they might want to do with their property. I try to get an idea whether they're conforming or not, over what time period would they want to do the work, and then I relay that to leaders at town hall, or Michael Ham, or somebody else who has very, very good knowledge of the planning and zoning regulations, or any other regulations that might be involved, like the inland wetlands, or ZBA, or anything like that. But now, what I want to say here is, I want to encourage all of you to do the same thing. Talk to your neighbors and friends and relatives that own non-conforming properties. Ask them if they intend to do any development over the next few years, as I've said on other programs. This is very important. It's critical. Once you get an idea, ask them to go to Steve Sadlowski or Mark Melanson or Mickey Ham, who lives on Highland Lake and has an office on Old Route 8, and try to get a feel for whether or not these new regulations, totally rewritten, has never been done before, I guess, 60 years, I'm told, and see how it's going to affect their property. And if it is going to affect their property, and you might get a lot of ifs, ands, and buts when you go to the town hall. Well, if you do this, or do you do that, or you do this, or you do that. But none of that is actually going to matter, because the commission can then make decisions. That's why I say, if you have anything of any size or importance that you want to do for future generations or future owners, or perhaps even yourselves, you need to get a very good land use engineer, like I always do, and a very good land use attorney, like I always try to do. And then you'll have a very, very, very good chance of winning, because they will tell you what you can do and what you can't do. You can make up your mind whether you want to go forward or not. If you don't want to go forward, you can cut your losses and pay them off and not use them anymore and not go forward for the permits. But I found out when I went for permits that with or without a lawyer and or a good land use engineer, they still try to pull the wool over your eyes. They still try to tell you, here are the reasons we can't do it. Here's the things you need to do to be able to do it. So even with a good engineer, land use engineer, and a good land use attorney, you still might get the runaround. They often say to me, why don't more people come to the planning and zoning meeting and explain what their needs are? And I say the reason they don't go is because if they have to bring a lawyer, and if they have to bring a good land use engineer, they may have to sit there for 1 or 2 or 3 or more hours waiting their turn, and you have to pay them for that at some cost of $150 to $350 an hour or something like that. Wake up, Bills. Don't go to bed early. Also, you may have to sit through with your land use engineer and your land use attorney a lot of drivel, small talk, bicycle shedding, boredom, arguments, misinformation, all kinds of things like that from the commission members. Don't believe me? Wait till you hear this clip later in the program tonight. You'll see for yourself. It's not easy to do. People have other things to do with their time. The landowner can't afford it. It's not easy. That's why people don't go to these commissions and express their views. Also, they don't think they got a chance in heck of getting them to change their mind. Even people who sign the petition, even the people who talk about things. You're not going to get them to change their mind. Their mind's made up. Brian, why are you even bothering to try to help the people in the town and city? Nobody wants to listen to you. Their mind's made up. They're going to do what they want to do. What's the sense of going to the public hearing when their mind's already made up, no matter what they say? Because they often say one thing in letters to the newspapers and on TV, and then do or mean just the opposite. You can't believe any of them. We don't trust them. We don't trust them at all. You can't fight City Hall. That's what my mom used to say too. You can't fight City Hall, so why do you even bother to waste your time trying? Well, you have to do that. That's how democracies work. You got to go out, try to educate the people that will be affected. Try them just to wake them up, make them aware of what's going on around them, because they're too busy with their daily lives, their family lives, their children's lives, their own lives, to pay attention and to look in the back pages of the Waterbury Republican for an ad that may or may not be there ever, or to go down to the town hall, like they say, and see if there's any notices on the board. Who does that? Raise your hand if you do that. Well, I don't see any hands that are raised, because not many people do it. I don't even do it myself most of the time. Somebody has to wake me up. Somebody has to say, Brian, they're trying to pull another fast one. You better go down and have a look in the town hall and talk to people. You better get out around the lake and inform people. And you might have to put up a few signs here and there. You might have to print up a lot of handouts. You might have to spend a lot of personal time, which most people don't have, explaining things to people and listening to their arguments. But what I'm asking you to do now on this program, because we don't have much more time, we only got a few more weeks here before the public hearing, is to get out there, talk to the people up and down your street and in your neighborhood, up and down your road, in the town or the city. Make sure they know what's happening. Make sure they know when it's going to happen. And give them a chance to find out from Steve Sedlowski, Michael Hamm, who's on their side all the time, and the building inspector, Mark Melanson, how these regulations, once they're enacted and become law, and are very difficult to change, are going to affect them, their neighbors, their relatives, their future property owners, their children, etc. And you do that by asking the people to get out and asking the town how these new, totally rewritten regulations will affect them. Now, one of the big things they say is that they're reducing the number of zones from 27 to 9 or some number like that. Well, that's good, perhaps. But other towns have a lot of zones. Torrington, I think, has 17 or 18 zones. And I wouldn't say it's bad to try to reduce the zones. It might be good. But that's not the main intent. Well, I can't knock on every door and walk around the lake in town in Winchester anymore like I did 10, 12 years ago. So all of you have to help. All of you have to contact your neighbors, spread the word, get involved, understand the problem. Now, I know a lot of people come to Winchester and the lake just to relax and enjoy themselves. They sure do get up when it comes time for the taxes. I'll now play about a 14 or 15 minute clip from the last Planning and Zoning meeting in order to make a few points after the clip is over. Listen closely. Wake up, Bills.
Are we talking about the zoning regs? I'd like to make a comment about Section 6, the non-conforming uses.
10-6.
10-6. That's how it still goes. My concern is not necessarily from the zoning aspect of it, but more from the financial aspect by having a limitation on one change up to 18 feet. does that actually pose a financial hardship on certain properties that it makes it more difficult for them to sell the property, knowing that they already had that one shot to make the improvement, and now somebody else comes in maybe 20 years or whatever, and they're locked into that, which means that the value of the property over time is actually going to be reduced. So I'm concerned that there might be a financial hardship by having a limitation as it is here. As long as you're not, you may want to have a further expansion, but as long as it doesn't cause another non-conforming issue within the property. Where I can see that over time, the smaller properties actually be cannibalized by the larger ones possibly next door, thereby giving them the added advantage of having more property to actually meet the area setback requirements, and thereby favoring the more wealthier property owners around the lake.
Well,
They've still got the option to go to planning zoning board of appeals.
Zoning board of
For
appeals to
variance.
get a permit, get a,
the other
They've always had that.
The other thing is that when you buy a piece of property, it's going to be, the deeds are researched. They will find that they've already been granted whatever. I mean, that carries through with the deed. So if somebody's already bit into the apple once, did what they wanted to do, if somebody's looking at the house and says, gee, I'd like to expand it, when they do a deed research, it should tell them, you're going to have to go to planning and zoning. They were already granted a variance or whatever one time.
ZBA.
You know, and, you know, you're going to buy it saying, you either are going to buy it saying, well, maybe I can, or I don't buy it because they've already had one bite. I mean, you're a buyer beware. I mean, that's common sense on research. You go buy a car, you do research on it. I don't know, that's my philosophy. It's going to tell you people around the lake that buy the houses, some of them didn't realize that there is deeded walkways through their yard.
Yeah.
And they got pissed off.
Yeah.
Well, I never knew that. Well, who did your deed research? They're right-of-ways. Hello? You know, when I bought mine, my neighbor had a right-of-way right up to my house. And I had it removed before I bought it. I mean, that's their problem. I mean, we can't control what somebody might want to do 10 years from now. I don't know. I mean, that's my thought on it.
I guess my thing is just then the limiting to the one change, does that over time lessen the value of the property?
Yeah, but that is not, I don't want you to be curt with it, but we can't consider that. Our job here is to consider the law, number one. Because if you go to zoning board of appeals and say, I want to add this beautiful 14-foot addition to my house because it's going to appreciate the value of my house, you know what they're going to do to you? They're going to say, no. Because that is not the consideration of either ZBA or us. I mean, like, I would love sitting here to be, you know, looking at each thing as a potential tax revenue item, but in reality, I can't, because that's not the job of this commission.
Yeah, my only concern is it favors the wealthier landowners.
Yeah, but
around
we're
the
not
lake.
here to be the
No, I
moral
understand
judges.
that. Well, it's not a question of moral judgment. I'll just leave it at this, saying that I think it puts an undue restriction upon the smaller, less affluent property owners.
Yeah,
who
but
may
that's
not
why
have
they buy
luxury.
that small little house, so they too can enjoy the lake. And I know many people that have those small little lots, small little houses, they wouldn't change a thing, because you know what? They really love it, as it is. But not everybody wants to have a McMansion.
Well, we're not even talking like mansion, we're just talking about 18 feet. You know, if you can just have it like 18 feet at a time, as long as you're not encroaching on any other violations of the. I think that if there's some flexibility so that you still maintain, you know, some control over the property, but at least as each new property owner comes in, at least they have something to work with.
I think we have to just live by the laws that are put down here, and that's it.
Okay. My concern was only for the, the less affluent who can't take advantage of these things.
I would love to have a huge mansion too.
I'm not
but
talking about
I can
mansion,
only
I'm just talking
afford
about
what I
18.
have.
I'm just talking about 18-foot expansion. I don't know how that jumped to automatically a McMansion, but anyhow, that was my concern from a financial hardship that this regulation might impose on certain property owners.
Yeah. Something to think about, but, again, it's going to be, just go back. I mean, if people don't do the research on it, something that's stupid. And then if you expand your house to where you're a couple of feet from the property line, you can't maintain it. I mean, if your new neighbor, when you originally do the expansion, your neighbor says, yeah, I don't care. And 10 years down the road, a new guy moves in, and you got to work on your house, and he says, no, you're not coming on my property. How are you going to work on it? You only got 12 inches, or 2 feet, even 3 feet. You can't put a ladder up at a safe distance, and it's only 3 feet to the property line. You can never get up 2 stories to do any work, or even if a roof had to be done or something. You got to have the setbacks for a simple reason.
Well, and then too, is my understanding, when you're working with these zoning regulations and you were constructing this whole document, you have to take a total look, not just segregate one section of people that you have to be concerned about. You have to encompass everybody.
Oh, I just to mention this, that development that's over in Torrington, it's Penny Lane is one of the streets. As you're going towards Torrington on 283, it's on the right-hand side. It has a couple exits in and out, and they go way down in that. There's these big houses. There's actually 10 feet between the houses, okay? Maybe 12. Drive down through there and look at some of the houses where the sun hits the energy-efficient windows that have low-E and Aragon.
Reflect off of it.
It's curling all the vinyl siding
Wow.
on the opposite house across the way.
Word.
And there's no way to do that unless your neighbor is willing to put up a specific outside shade. I just went through this with a lady. Last year when I looked at the curling siding, this guy was selling it. It was 1.5 squares to be replaced. Went back there a month ago, and it's over 4 squares that are curled down the side of that house. And I couldn't understand what was going on. I popped the siding, it wasn't tight. I called the manufacturer, they came out and they showed us the guy next door's energy efficiency from the solar energy has melted the vinyl siding and curled it. And this woman's furious. She paid $290,000 for that house.
With this section 6, it's a policy decision, and we wanted to try and have an easy way for folks to expand their property, and we came up with the 18 feet as being a fairly decent sized addition. It's not huge, but we had to draw the line somewhere, so that could be modified, I suppose, but this would be able to be done anywhere in town.
Right.
It's not just
lake.
Not just the lake. So,
because I imagine there's a number of properties that are in downtown Winston that
Oh, yeah.
would be affected just
I mean,
the same.
I've run into people that could have used this now. One guy that wanted to put a porch on this would have probably worked for him, but his main problem was getting the survey. But it's totally a policy. I mean, the numbers can get tweaked certainly.
That's what you have ZBA for.
Yeah, but like I said before, ZBA is it's hard to get an approval for ZBA for an addition when you already have a functioning house or cottage or whatever the case might be. So it's hard, but you have to
The only thing I would throw out there, if commission wanted to, to get beyond that first one, you could allow it by special permit if you wanted to do or something like that. Something to toss around, but that would be the only, it's up to you. That would be the only, then they would need a hardship, but they'd have to go through the process and notify the neighbors and everything. That would be the only way I would think it would work well. But
then what you're starting to do, exactly where we ended up with that 10.6, you're breaking down the value of your zoning regulations and weakening them. And I don't think that's a good idea, because if you go, I could speak for people around the lake. I have seen backhoes in the lake bed. I've seen all kinds of construction going on that was not permitted. And the weaker we are with our regulations and the less we abide by the law, and that's our regulations, we're just going to wind ourselves back into the position we're in right now. I mean, we were advised by the attorney that that was not a good regulation. And it hasn't been a good one for a good many years, which is why you've had such an explosion of people using it. That's not what zoning regulations are meant to be in my book.
Well, now you have an opportunity that we've actually laid out, what's heading toward a common sense solution here. And I'm just trying to say that there may be some extra flexibility that we can put in here without going back to the total freedom that you have with the 10.6, but just to have some kind of thing so that the property values of some of these people, they're not forced out or whatever, because of the value of the property has gone down because of this limitation.
You can't keep
Especially
adding on to your buildings either. You can't continue to take non-conforming lots and just build willy-nilly, whatever they want. I mean, it's the lake is being compromised, has been compromised.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's the runoff. It's a lot of things. You get more pervious surfaces.
Well, I mean, to offset things, I mean, the way those regulations read right now, especially up at the lake, the driveways, if you have the it's pervious, right? The pervious surface.
Pervious.
Or
yeah.
it's not lot coverage anymore. That's more liberty right there. So, I wouldn't be for amending anything.
I'd say we go through the 20th and see what flies.
Yeah,
I really do.
yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if those two bills are still awake. I'm hoping these bells work. Well, you heard a little bit of what went on at the last P&Z meeting. That was an excerpt from the meeting, lasted about 14 and a half minutes or so. The meeting lasted quite a while, hour and a half or so, maybe two, I don't remember exactly. But a lot of people don't want to hang around through the whole meeting to hear these kind of things. Also, most people, including myself, can't really determine what that was all about. Everybody expressing their own opinions, bringing up things from Torrington, bringing up all kinds of different viewpoints, which may or may not be legal. Who knows? Who knows? So you're wasting your time if you go down there and spend a whole evening, couple hours, don't even start till 7 o'clock, listening to all that, bicycle shedding, and all that kind of stuff. I also think that Steve can help a lot by making the applications go much quicker, by ensuring that people are prepared when they come to the meeting and they have all the right information. That's been a big problem over the last few years, where we didn't have a good planning director, or we didn't have anybody to really prepare these people. Scott Eisenlohr tried his best, but he was spread very thin, and he was not the planning director. He just assumed that role and responsibility for a while when we didn't have a planning director. He was more in charge of the inland wetlands side of the commissions. So anyway, that's why you got to have a good land use attorney like Pearlie Grimes, who helped the people at 636 East Wakefield Boulevard. There are others too. He's not the only one. And you got to have a good land use engineer. There's a few around. Richard Calkins in Torrington. Jason Desmukes helped a lot on 636 East Wakefield Boulevard when they took their year and a half to get their permits approved under Section 10.6 while it still existed before July 22nd, 2016, when it was removed by this Planning and Zoning Commission. Hastily, in a rush, they shoved the decision down your throat. Don't forget, they are appointees with all kinds of different qualifications. I don't think I'd have any of them managing my money. It's difficult enough having to deal with them with my properties. Now, I've been pretty lucky, as I always tell you, because I get prepared before I go in, and I always follow the law after taking advice from the land use attorneys that I employ and the land use engineers that I employ. And then I still get kickback from people like Althea Perez. And, once in a while they turn you in to all kinds of different committees and commissions. And they usually turn out to be wrong. So, I continue to ask you to get involved, to speak up, to try to help everyone in town and future people coming to town and the city, to create a good environment. We need to grow the revenue base. There's no doubt about that. The town manager, who's excellent, will tell you that. The planning director, who's excellent, will tell you that. They may be concerned, I don't know for sure, but they may be concerned about the financial condition that the state is in at this particular time. That doesn't help anybody. If you've got companies, large companies, moving out of Fairfield and Hartford to other locations in other states for financial reasons, that's not good for our town and city. But my view is that despite whatever the state problems are, and there are a lot, we just had the library last year, the college library, cut by 7 people or so by the state. And this year, the college library that I attend many times during the week to work on my books had to condense its hours. It is no longer open on Saturday in the winter. It closes early on Thursday and Friday, and I think Wednesday too, at 4 o'clock instead of 8 p.m. like they did last year. And this is a result of the budget cuts. But my view is that we, despite what's going on in the state and to a certain extent in the country right now, we can still be successful. We can go out and find the clean companies, the clean businesses, the clean family people, the clean everything that will help us to raise the grand list in the advantageous areas that pay for all the needs that we have in our town and city, to repair the roads and bridges, to clean up the poisoned ground under the old factories that was left behind when they left town, to tear down their buildings, to get new people to come into the area, one way or the other. We have a very difficult situation with Route 44 going right through the center of our town. And during the flood, we needed assistance from the state to repair that whole road. So now we have certain conditions placed upon us by the state that make it hard to get things done. We can't put any buildings over the river, for example, along Route 44. I don't think the state will allow us to do that. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they won't. We've looked into that in the past, not me, but other people, town leaders have looked at that, try to do something about it. But anyway, it starts, of course, with the regulations. You need to have the flexibility to keep the landowners that you have now, many of whom are gentrifying and want to leave the town and the state for many reasons. Most of the properties, of course, except for those in Winchester, are non-conforming properties. And people need to be able to improve within reason. As I told the planning director, the land use director he's called, Stephen Sedlowski, most people are already in the huge setbacks that were put in many years ago to stop condo development and other such development on Highland Lake. Not good. The 20 feet doesn't mean much to them because they don't have the 20 feet. The 20 feet's all right for the few people who do have it, and when you can move only a few feet, that's okay if you can move a few feet within the 20 feet. Most people aren't happy with a one-time permit for the up to 20 feet if you're in the right position and the right situation, which is all defined in these proposed planning and zoning regulations that will be presented at the public hearing on September 20th, 7 p.m., Pearson Band Room. Plenty of parking at Pearson, that's good. They do have other room in the building in case the meeting has to be moved because a lot too many people show up. But I think you got to get there. You got to speak up. It's your main opportunity. Now, we are putting in an application to try to have another public hearing to get another chance at getting Section 10.6 and or some reasonable replacement into the new planning and zoning regulations that will be approved sooner or later by the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is all very interesting stuff. I'm hoping that we can get some legal people to the public hearing and some planning and zoning experts, if any of you out there are experts in that area, land use attorney or land use engineers, and you want to help to contribute to the town's future, please show up at the meeting and give some helpful advice to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Ask questions, give feedback. There's plenty of attorneys around the town and city that could be very helpful if they donate their time, much like I'm doing and other people are doing, to try to help these landowners that have non-conforming properties throughout the town and the city. Now, there are other issues that we're not addressing as much, but should be addressed, and that is where the business zones are and industrial zones, distribution of those, what are the rules out in Winchester that may be changing, and what are the other rules that are changing, and are they worthwhile, and will they help or hurt? This is a democracy. Everybody gets to say, but of course not many people speak up. I was just talking today to a person who said hardly anybody votes in this town. We get a very small turnout. And when you get a small turnout, it's very easy for people who aren't qualified to win elections and then appoint other people that aren't qualified to the various committees and commissions. Now, I must say to you, and I'm sure you probably understand this, that most people that own a business in our town and city, or do a lot of business in our town and city, don't like to get involved in politics. They don't want to get involved in helping to run the town. Now, in the old days, before 1960 or so, the town was kind of run by businessmen who understood that you have to make a dollar before you spend a dollar. Nowadays, you have to make a dollar if you want to spend 50 cents. So it's very interesting. Very interesting indeed. In the area, we have factories leaving. They provide jobs. The jobs won't be there unless we can attract more clean businesses and industry into our town. That will be difficult because we don't really have any big industrial zone anymore. In the old days, industry was everywhere because there was no planning and zoning until, 50s or 60s or so. And you could have a factory in your backyard, you could have a local store in your backyard, you could have all kinds of things in your backyard. But we're now controlled and run and managed in our area, town and city, by people who don't want anything in their backyard. And they do an awful lot to make sure that you can't get very much in your own backyard either. So we have to pay attention. I think sooner or later, Malthus's theory will take charge, and certain things will happen to wake the town up. Some have already, with stealing and mismanagement of money, and businesses leaving town, and residential people leaving town, and the schools having terrible test scores at the low level and being all goofed up, and the state taking over the Board of Education. Those are all part of Malthus's theory beginning to take place. Maybe we need another flood. I don't know. I hope not. But somehow, something's going to happen here sooner or later. It'll probably be the big bond issue that wakes everybody up when they want to put out bond issues to do all the roads and bridges and fix up certain buildings around town and make a new police station and make a new firehouse and make a new town hall and make a new this and make a new that. when they probably should be closing another school. So with that, I'm going to wind up tonight. I'll play the alarm once more, the bells ringing for the two Bills and their wives. Play that right now. But wait a minute. This program's over now. Bill, if you're still awake, Bill number 1, you can go to bed now. Bill number 2, I know you're watching at a different time because we record the program, but it's over now. Thank you for listening tonight. I hope the bells helped to keep a lot of people awake that I usually put to sleep, I'm told, when I do these programs. Good night, Brian O'Hearn. See you next week.